to this episode of Who Gets the China. Today, we're meeting with Kristin Zeid, who is a physical therapist working at a retirement community with older adults. I'm excited to learn more about how we can encourage the positive things that come from PT and know what to be looking out for with our aging parents. So, Kristin, thank you so much for being my guest today.
Yes, thank you for having me.
So, I know we talked a little bit, and you work primarily with adults maybe in their 70s to 90s. You work with people who are in the independent living aspect of the retirement community, and then also people who are in the kind of more rehab side where maybe they're recovering from a surgery or a hospital stay, and then you're providing PT for them to help them on their road to recovery. Does that kind of sum it up pretty well?
It does sum it up well. Yes.
So tell me, how did you get into working with older adults?
Yeah, it's not what I thought I wanted to do when I was in physical therapy school. It's not what I had my sights on, but over 20 years ago when I got out of college and was looking for a job, it was one that was available. I took it and I've been doing the same thing ever since. I did it a couple years in Indiana and then I've been doing it out here in Colorado ever since. And I even considered changing to a different setting at one point, but I find that I like this setting so much that I'm sticking with it. I love it because we, especially on the side of things where we are working with people who have had an incident where they find themselves in the hospital and then, they're not well enough to go straight back to their home. People come to us for a number of weeks, usually about 3 weeks, some people much longer and some people shorter than that, of course. But we get to work with people on a daily basis and really get to know them, know their family members. We get to know kind of what motivates that person. We're not always, of course, we're not seeing them at their best time.
Mm-hmm.
They've experienced something that they need help. But I enjoy kind of learning about that person and again what motivates them. And much of the time we're able to help them get back to home in some form or fashion, and that's incredibly rewarding.
I imagine you probably meet a lot of really interesting characters.
We meet a lot of really interesting characters. You meet incredibly interesting people who have lived so much of their life, and have a lot of interesting stories to tell. We also work with people when they unfortunately have to take a lot of pain medication and things like that. So we see all sides of things, and we a lot of times have family members come in to say, "Oh, I hope that my dad or my mom wasn't mean to you today," and we really can kind of let it roll off because we know, people are, going through this time period. So we're here to help them through that.
Well, that's nice. Yes, that's very gracious of you. I'm thinking about my kids coming out of wisdom teeth anesthesia and how funny that is. And now they want you to record them, right? Because they say crazy stuff. And this time our the dentist was like, we don't allow that anymore.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he was like, we have them recover on their own so that they can't be made fun of later. I'm sure older people say some crazy things, at least speaking from my own personal experience with my own parents. Sometimes it's surprising what might come out of their mouth. What are things that people might not know about physical therapy and aging well?
People don't always realize how much a physical therapist can probably help with, the normal things come to mind, an injury, pain, that type of thing. But something like balance or endurance, those are things that can diminish, over time. And therefore it could be harder to recognize. So I think that's where my mind goes, especially with the population that I work with. PTs can help with that, we can probably help quite a bit. We take objective numbers. There are different balance tests out there, of course, that can help you see your progress. Maybe it's hard for you to step up on a curve with your cane, and we can make that piece better, because we've made you stronger and made your balance better. Not that we have made it, but you have worked in a way to make yourself better. I always say, they say thank you for working with me. And I say, you're doing all the work. I just get to be along for the ride, and give you the next step to do. But I think those pieces are easier to, like I said, kind of sneak up on you, let's say. So those are the pieces that can go unseen.
So let's talk a little bit about how you can kind of come in after somebody's had a major health event and really transform their healing experience, not only physically, but also from an emotional, like a mental health standpoint.
Yeah,
How do you do that?
yeah. So just kind of the overall process. Somebody has been in the hospital, then they come to our community again, like I said, for a few weeks at a time. But that initial meeting that we're doing, we kind of do a formal evaluation, but we're finding out information from that person about, what they were able to do before. What kinds of things do they like to do, when they're not, when they're at home? Are they driving and going to the golf course 4 days a week? Or, is a big day making a couple meals for themselves and their spouse? And through that process, we can start to learn a little bit about what motivates that person, what's going to help to get that person home safely. And we're not always the people that they want to see walk into their room, because often what I'm asking them to do may not be comfortable, and
Right.
it's probably going to be hard, if they've had an injury of some sort, to get up and walk across, the room to the restroom may be really, really tough, when it wasn't a few weeks ago. And so just kind of getting to know that person, and talking through it with them and letting them know, this is what we're working towards, and this is where you are now, but this is not where we anticipate you being in a couple days or a couple weeks.
So kind of giving them hope, letting them know your goal is to get them back to the activity level that they were at, or maybe even enhanced.
Absolutely. And, and even more, I can have some goals for them, but more importantly, knowing what their goals are, and often things that will come up, for some people, their goal is just to get home safely. Some people say, I want to get home, but, oh, by the way, my, grandson's getting married in 6 weeks. And I'd like to be able to get on a plane and make it to his wedding.
Yeah.
That really gives us something to shoot for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. It's nice to have a specific goal when you can achieve it. It's nice to feel that you've gotten them to do the thing that they really wanted to do.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's why I love doing what I do.
My mom had lung surgery many years ago where she had part of her lung removed. And so after that, she had to be on oxygen and the recovery took some time, but eventually her doctor prescribed pulmonary PT. She goes to like the hospital, they have a cardiac unit and they work on exercises with them. And I mean, I will say it was a gigantic transformation in her, which she's really proud of.
Yeah.
She feels great about that, that she can get around without oxygen, her lung capacity is increased, and also she loves going there because now she has a little community of friends. There's the person who oversees it. His name is Glenn. I mean, we know about him because she's always telling us stories about how amazing Glenn is, and so it's kind of been interesting to see for me this like relationship. It's not just post surgery, it's a longer term relationship. But I would love to hear you talk a little bit about also those socialization and mental health benefits that you are able to help your clients achieve.
Another big advantage of working in a retirement community, we have the side of things where people come to us for a few weeks, but we also have residents who live here full time in independent living or assisted living, kind of whatever level they need. Um, and that is one of the things that's so neat about doing this type of work, is really being able to get to know people over the years.
Mm-hmm.
They may be living in independent living and have a sore shoulder, and we get to work with them and kind of get them through that piece and learn, more about them. And obviously, like you said, with your mom and Glenn, they learn a little bit about us too.
Yeah.
They're often asking us questions about our families and our kids and things like that. And we work where they live. So it's
Right.
like to be able to run into people in the hallways, even if we haven't seen them in a little while, and check in with them and see how things are going. A big part of it is that socialization piece. You can put in a lot of exercise, but the part that maybe keeps you coming back is, or makes you look forward to it, is
Yes.
the person who you're working with or working around, other people who are there working out as well.
It's so true. And I'm thinking about my dad, who he's 90 and he's had some stability issues, like, hip pain, things like that. And he started working with a PT. So great, right? He liked to go. He was happy to go visit with her. And I think for him, there was that social connection also. And then as the insurance ran out, he stopped going. And he even admitted to me, like, oh, it'd be good for me to get back, not only just for the physical benefits, but I like, connecting with my physical therapist. She's great. She's super fun to talk to. So there's that benefit that I think maybe we underappreciate a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking for that continued connection, to continue to improve, or in the very least maintain what they gained.
Hmm.
Um, and a lot of people kind of know themselves that, I won't do this on my own. So I'm going to
Me,
schedule it.
that's
Yeah.
me.
I'm going to schedule a time with you, weekly or a couple times a week, to come and work with you. What I always tell the people I work with is the best exercise program is the one that you're going to do, that you're going to follow through on. And for some people, for everybody, that looks a little bit different. Some people are very disciplined, will get up, do their shoulder exercise program at the same time every day before they eat their breakfast, after they have their cup of coffee. Other people need to schedule that time, whether it's going to a group class. My mom, for many years, preferred to do her exercise at home, but recently she's gotten into a class that she likes,
Hmm.
and that's perfect. Um, and for other people, it's taking a walk, every evening. um, I see a gentleman who walks around our neighborhood every evening about the same time. Always give him a good wave. It's amazing what the people of this generation have lived through.
Yeah.
um, and that's another reason I love doing my job so much, is to hear things that they have lived through. And for me, I've got two teenagers. It sometimes gives us some perspective, right, of
Yeah.
what we are concerned about in this moment may not be that big of a deal. And these older adults have lived through so much in their lifetime.
What are some things that I could look for in my parent that physical therapy could help them improve their quality of life or their safety?
Some big areas come to mind. The first two that come to mind are pain and balance. So often, I think with older adults, they may have had a nagging pain, that they've dealt with. So many of these older adults have such a high pain tolerance that they may just keep on keeping on. But as caregivers, we may notice things that they were able to do before that they can't or don't do now. I'll give you an example. We were home in Louisiana visiting my parents. Um, and each evening, our whole family of 10 would get together for dinner, and my mom and I were working on extending the table. She was kind of holding her arm funny, when she was holding it up, and said, what's going on there? She said, oh, my shoulder gives me trouble. She's like, oh, it has for years.
Uh-huh. Oh my
But
gosh.
lately it feels a little worse. And, these are the things that I'm not able to do. I'm not able to lift things, off the higher shelf and things like that. So I was able to give her some exercises. She's doing them. I need to check in with her to see if they're working or not. But things like that,
Yeah.
if you notice that a parent or a loved one isn't able to do things now that they were able to do before.
I'm thinking about my friend. She was telling a story about her dad was walking down the stairs backwards. And they were like, oh my gosh, is he having a cognitive issue? Like, what is going on? Why is he walking down the stairs backwards? And then when they
Yeah,
asked more about it, it was just because some muscles in his legs were bothering him, and it was easier for him to walk down the stairs backwards than the right way. But I think they were nervous, like that doesn't feel safe, right? Like you could very easily fall down the stairs or whatever. So, I mean, that might be a very obvious sign that there's pain or something that needs addressing. But a lot of times it's, like you said, it's more subtle. It's just something that maybe they no did normally in the past that all of a sudden you notice they're not doing, or it's not going well.
Absolutely. Yeah, it can be so subtle. Obviously an acute pain that you didn't have before, I think all of us would probably go get that checked out. But I think, kind of what we're looking for is kind of those more subtle things. Another big thing is maybe not having the energy levels to do
Mm.
what they were able to before. And I'll kind of rope that balance piece in with this. Your parent used to go to your son's, sporting events and had no problem walking, a few hundred yards across a grassy field. But maybe, they're coming up with more and more excuses of why they don't want to do that, or they know a specific location works well for them because they can park close and it's an easier walk. Noticing some of those, maybe they used to always go out to a certain restaurant with a group of friends, but because the distance to get to the restaurant is too far, they're starting to kind of limit themselves. And I would look for those things
Hmm.
because to me, going to that sporting event or going out to dinner with friends is something that in the past has probably provided them good quality of life. And those are the things that I would think that we want our parents to be able to continue doing, at least in some capacity.
This is
Yeah.
hitting so home for me. So I need you to give me some coaching because my dad was out here for my nephew's high school graduation, and it was at the university stadium. And kind of exactly what you're saying of, you know, normally he would be able to walk that walk, but when we got to the grassy, it was a little bit far, the parking, and then it was a little bit grassy, and then there was a little bit of stairs into the stadium and sidewalk that maybe wasn't perfectly even. And so I really noticed that he was weaving and not stable. And I mean, I said to him, like, Dad, I think let's sit down. You're not looking that stable. But I don't feel like I had the best way in to that conversation. So,
Yeah.
like, coach me. I mean, what's a good way to acknowledge that with a parent and then positively try to get them to maybe take some action to seek some care?
In the moment, getting through the situation at hand as safely as possible, right? But kind of giving them maybe an excuse and an out of why this walk may be harder. Let's sit for a minute and then, kind of taking a look at the next route to find the easiest one. Again, kind of just making that instance right there as safe as possible. But then, depending on the situation, exactly, maybe later that evening at a quieter moment or later that week at a quieter moment, maybe just kind of sharing generally observations of, hey, Dad, I noticed that to me, this seemed harder than what it has seemed in the past. Have you noticed any differences? And maybe he'll say, no, it was just a one off. I forgot to drink my second cup of coffee that day. I wasn't feeling well.
Right.
Or maybe he'll say, yeah, it has. I'm just not able to do what I was able to do before. Those conversations are tough. I always, I always come back to the fact that our parents, they unless they have a big cognitive issue, they are their own decision makers.
Right. That's such a good point. Yep.
They get to lead in any decisions. We we all make decisions that aren't the best for us. I do it daily. I could exercise more. I could eat
Right.
better. We all do that. So and our parents have been making their own decisions for their whole life. So they get to continue to do that. So I think having a discussion about what they want and if there are things that we can guide them towards within their permission and desire to do so, that's where my mind goes.
I love that because it's sort of circling around later and not kind of shaming or embarrassing or making them self-conscious about it, because that's not going to get you to where you want to go. Um, and like in that moment, I kind of looked at my husband and I was like, how about can you go bring the car around? Right? Like, so let's just kind of what you said, like, let's solve the problem for the moment and then we can kind of circle back around later. I've tried to continue to encourage, like, why don't you go back to PT or, you know, let's take some steps to figure out what's going on. I haven't quite gotten there yet, but
Going back to that, the best exercise program is the one you're going to do. Sometimes it feels so overwhelming. Um, I was talking to a friend of ours recently who's trying to help his parents. And, at one point I just suggested, like, taking if your parents have a long hallway, especially coming out of surgery or something, like if you did 5 laps in the hallway yesterday, try to do 6 today. I want to recommend um, things that seem doable.
yeah.
If we put too many obstacles in front of us, it's easy for any of us to not do it that day. So sometimes just walking one more mailbox down the street can be an improvement, and that's okay. Because maybe the next day you'll walk one more,
Right.
and then you're working towards that goal.
We were talking about doing things that seem doable and then just setting a reasonably next level goal, right? Like to the next mailbox, the next quarter mile, one more
Yep.
something, that can kind of show some improvement slowly, but over time.
Absolutely. I think so often, especially older adults and probably all of us, when we've gone, we think back to what we were able to do 6 months ago. And we want to be there immediately. And it's when you're in it and you're living it, it's hard to notice the small gains. Often with what I do at work, because we're working with people daily, I will reference kind of that first time that I saw them. And I said, do you remember that first day when I came in and all we were able to walk was from your chair to the bed? It was about 10 feet. And now you're walking down a 150-foot hallway. You know, that's a huge improvement. And they'll say, no, I don't remember. And not because their cognition is poor, but
Right.
because it's been a lot and they're not thinking about what they were able to do or not do 3 weeks ago. Another example is my dad had needed to have a heart procedure in June. And then we just went and visited again in July, and he's doing so much better. But because he's living it every day, he doesn't see all that progress. My brother made a comment about just some of the things we were able to do as a family, and he said he wouldn't have been able to do that a week ago. And I said, tell him that, because it is hard to see it when you're living it hour to hour and day to day.
Right. You just don't see, you don't notice the small gains, like you said. So having somebody else point that out and be encouraging is is really powerful. That's for
Yeah,
all of us, especially for them to kind of keep them motivated and keep going.
yeah, and to try not to compare to what they were able to do a decade ago.
Making a more recent comparison to see the improvement versus trying to focus on what you can no longer do, I think is harder as we get older, right? Like my dad finally had to give up his golf club membership at 90. He admitted that that was a really hard emotional decision to make because it's such a thing that's been part of his life for 70 years. But
Right.
now in today, trying to really be like, hey, dad, you know what? Today you walked a mile and a half. That's amazing, right? 2 months ago, you couldn't even get to the path. So shifting that perspective, I think, is hard, but probably really important.
And hopefully those improvements are, also transferring to better quality of life things.
Right.
Hopefully he's getting out and about, maybe not playing golf, but still maybe going to lunch with those golf buddies.
Right. Let's talk a little bit about kind of your role in helping families navigate care decisions. Can you talk a little bit about how you can kind of get involved in some of those decisions?
At the community where I work, so for the folks who are here for the short term rehab, we are able to do a weekly meeting with most everyone who's here for rehab. And what we do is we sit down with the patient, the person, the rehab guest who we're working with, and then anyone who they also want to be a part of that. But we're able to kind of go through, what we're seeing, and we are talking about what is going to be a safe discharge plan. And that's we're leading with whatever their goal is. Most often it's to get back home or to get back to wherever, they were living before. And that's the goal that we work towards. Sometimes people, will realize that they need a higher level of care, and that may be bringing more help into their home, either for a short time or ongoing. That can look like maybe a couple hours of help in the morning, a couple hours of help in the evening. It can look like bringing somebody in, for more consistent, time blocks, 6 to 8 hours, that type of thing. But we, talk through that with them of, these are the things that you're able to safely do on your own. These are the things that we recommend to have help with and how that can look. Here at our community, for some people, that may look like moving from independent living to assisted living. And those are hard conversations to have. Mm-hmm. After assisted living, kind of the next level of care is long-term care, where you have a nurse available to you 24 hours a day. And what we do is, obviously talk with the patient resident who we're working with and kind of offer the options. We make recommendations on how much help we think they need. As can be expected, sometimes as caregivers, we think that person needs more help than they do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was going to say, this is dovetailing into something I'm dealing with right now.
Yeah. And, depending on the situation, especially if they're living in their own home, that they get to decide. They get to decide ultimately is what it comes down to. But what we can do as healthcare workers and healthcare professionals is give them examples of why we feel like help would be a good idea.
I'm thinking for my mom, right? She's doing great, but she's got medication. She's got like appointments to make that sometimes get to be too much, or, my dad is getting older, needs a little bit more help. I struggled to tell my mom why she would benefit from having a twice a week somebody come in and support them. She's like, "Oh, I don't need that."
Yeah.
So like talk about that. How do you give some examples for people so that they can come to the good decision on their own?
Yeah. And I try to do it in a way of offering suggestions, or, again, in my role are recommendations, giving the caveat that they get to decide. But, there's some pretty clear cut things. You weren't taking your medication right. You ended up in the hospital. We recommend you have help with medication. It's not always that clear cut, right? We have some different kind of tests or discussions we can have on the medication piece of, are you really understanding what you're taking and when? And then do you feel like you need help with that? There are lots of ways to help with medication. Setting up pill boxes, obviously. These days there are automated pill boxes that kind of give you a ring or an audible reminder. Mm-hmm. Having a family member call or text and say, did you get your morning medications in, that type of thing. Getting, helping them get, after my dad's recent procedure, he's so organized, but he essentially has a spreadsheet, that because of the medications he needs to take at certain times a day that are time dependent, that's what he has decided to do. And, mm-hmm. We work with people who have a system where they keep it in their cabinet, and they've worked out a system that works for them. So often we'll start with, what system do you use and do you feel like it's working? Again, some people have the insight to say, no, it's not working. But obviously the harder conversations are when we as caregivers feel like it's not working and the person feels like it's working just fine. On your broader question, I know I kind of delved into the medication stuff there, but so often we are recommending help, especially with showers. If you're not feeling safe yet in the shower, coming out of the hospital and skilled rehab, if they're coming to help you with the shower, then, oh, by the way, they could also throw in a couple loads of laundry with you and get your lunch prepared. Somebody who's coming in to help them could help with those bigger tasks of, kind of doing more like a deep clean of a certain area or organizing a certain area. Some of those bigger tasks that may feel too overwhelming
Yeah.
on your own. But,
Yeah.
coming out of the rehab portion, we're usually making more recommendations around, like you said, the medications, showers, safety, meal prep, that type of thing.
I love thinking about some of those other things that are things you just don't really want to do, right? Like
Right.
laundry. I mean, maybe you can do your clothes, but like washing your sheets is a real pain in the neck and making the bed. And, um, what are some of the other things that don't feel so medically driven, I think is kind of a little bit where I've been able to get some buy-in from my mom. I mean, she's still not there yet, but I've tried to say like, well, what if, somebody could make a dinner here and there, or there's some other things that people could do to assist you. Nobody's saying you're not capable, but I think at this point in your life, you've earned a little help.
You've earned a little help, and so often what we kind of talk about too is having someone else do some of those things for you so that you can save your energy to do the things you really want to do. Yes, you can get the tasks done, but then did you wear yourself out and then you're not able to go to lunch with your friends, meet up with your family for dinner, that type of thing. So having somebody else do those high energy tasks so that you can kind of save your energy for something more exciting.
Yeah, like prioritize what you really want to do with your time. And I interviewed the woman that's in charge of creative aging at the Denver Art Museum, and she's amazing. And one of the things that we were talking about was how important creativity is. But a lot of times, I mean, of course, for your whole life, but as an older adult, it really can be, I mean, you probably know this too, like a great way to connect, a great way to use different muscle groups, things like that. But it can be something that you prioritize last. And kind of what I hear you saying is, if you have somebody else to take over making sure your medication is working or some of these other things, like that's a way to free up your time so that you could do the art or go to the chorus class or what are those things that feed you that you want to do.
And another good task to give to somebody else is grocery shopping,
Oh,
unless you love to do it yourself. But yeah.
can I give it to somebody? I'm ready to give that away. Just talking with you, I've learned a lot about what physical therapy is above and beyond how I view physical therapy. But I haven't appreciated the positive impact that a physical therapist could have on my parents or on other older adults. So hearing you talk about all the different ways that a physical therapist gets involved has been awesome. Like I've now got a nice list. I've been taking notes how I can go back to my dad and be like, "Okay, here's what your PT could do for you. Let's bring it back up and let's see if we can get you back in."
I joke that even though I'm a PT, because I'm their daughter, my parents don't always listen to my advice. But working with that professional, that PT, can help be a sounding board. Something as a PT that I say to someone may, come off different than if their daughter or son was saying it to them. They may just hear it differently.
For sure. I love that your mom was willing to take your advice on the shoulder.
I, I know now I've got to follow up with her though and see if it's actually helping. I told her, I was like, I'm going to start you with this, but if it doesn't help, I've got other things we can do.
Yeah. Well, is there anything that I didn't ask that you want to make sure you chime in about? I feel like we covered a lot of ground.
Yeah, I feel like we did too. Yeah, I'll probably think of something I forgot to say, but.
Well, thank you for being here. Thank you to my listeners for listening today. And if you have questions or concerns, you can email us at info@whogetsthechina. And please listen and review. And if you know an older adult that might benefit from our conversation or a caregiver, please share this episode. Thanks so much for being here, Kristin.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. This was fun.
Who Gets the China is written and hosted by Kirsten Mau, produced by Bryce of Blue Ogden Productions. Our theme music is composed by Greg Fellman of Wind Sand Productions. Our cover art is by Jen Beam of Gigawatt Studio. For more stories and expert advice, follow along on Substack or at www.whogetsthechina.com. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with someone who might appreciate the conversation. And don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Until next time.